Hello, Notre Dame fans. I am Ashton Pollard here with Tyler Horka, and we just wrapped up spring practice number 8. We didn't get to watch the full practice today. It was just the first 5 periods, so a lot of stretching and drills, but we do have a couple of updates for you. Before we go into that, first of all, wanted to go ahead and plug our $1 deal with On3 at blueandgold.com. It is $1 for a full year of content. We have all of the sports you could possibly want. We have message board access, recruiting insight, all of that stuff. So again, $1 for 1 year. That deal will not be around forever, so you want to take advantage of it. And then Tyler wanted to plug our newest magazine edition.
Here we are.
Go ahead.
In the blue and gold office right now, so I thought I'd pick up one of these bad boys and show you. There should be a link on blueandgold.com to get to where you can actually subscribe to the magazine as well, because that's a totally different thing. I would subscribe to both because, like Ashton said, you're getting tons of stuff on the website, but you can't get this physical print copy on a website. And I know that's kind of dated, but how good does that look? You're going to want one of those. You're going to want one of those all season long, all off season long too. So had to plug that.
Yes. No, you absolutely do want some of that. And some of that stuff is going to be magazine exclusive as we move forward too. So it won't all be online. So yes, we can move into practice now. So as I said, first 5 periods. I guess the big news that we have basically is a lot of injury updates. So Tyler, what did we learn today from Marcus Freeman and also from what we could see at practice?
Well, some rumors started swirling yesterday that Joe Wilkins might have had foot surgery. I know it was April Fool's Day, but we're not fooling. Marcus Freeman is not fooling. We talked to him after practice. Joe Wilkins did have foot surgery yesterday, so the first thing that we saw when we went in there was no Joe Wilkins, and that is the case. He's going to be out for the rest of the spring. Obviously, probably out for the summer as well, whatever workouts that the wide receivers are doing kind of on their own time during the summer. He's not going to be a part of those as he rehabs from a foot injury. Really kind of tough news for a guy that just had MCL surgery in October, I believe it was. This whole spring session was supposed to be for him about getting back, maybe being one of the top 3-4 wide receivers on this team, pushing for a starting role. Even if he didn't have a starting role, he was going to be a big factor in this wide receivers room, a wide receivers room that's pretty depleted as it was, and now even more so. So kind of big news, not just for Joe Wilkins, but the Notre Dame wide receiver core.
Yeah, absolutely. And like Tyler said, that's a Liz Frank injury. Marcus Freeman did confirm that specifically earlier. Otherwise, Chris Tyree was back out there. I know that we had reported last week he suffered it was a high ankle sprain, I believe, but he is back out there, so he's pretty much all set. Otherwise, that's kind of the big injury notes, unless you have anything else to add on that.
Joey Tonona has been out with a concussion, and Marcus Freeman said it was a pretty bad one. I know last week we watched a whole practice. I believe it was last Saturday. I did notice that he was out. Marcus Freeman didn't talk about it then, but he talked about it today, and obviously he's been out for over a week, and Deion Colsey also had a concussion, so he's been back. He's a full participant, so if you're grading those concussion scales, obviously Tonona's has been a little heightened, a little worse, and as an offensive lineman, you're going to want to keep a guy like that off the field anyway. So early enrollee freshman, it's just great that he's even on campus watching these practices, even if he doesn't get to participate in them because of the concussion. But yeah, Tyree's back, Colsey's back, Tonona out, and Wilkins out. Those are the big injury. Those are the injury news that you need to know.
Yeah, and then we'll kind of stick with some of the wide receiver news. We did, after practice, in addition to Marcus Freeman, which we'll get to in a second, we did get to talk with wide receivers coach Chancey Stuckey, as well as 4 of the wide receivers this afternoon as we kind of make our way through all the position groups. Tyler, what did we learn from those conversations today?
I think it's a confident group, even if the numbers are a little low. They're down to 5 scholarship guys in the spring. Yes. We talked to 4 of them. The one that we didn't talk to was Matt Salerno. I would like to talk to Matt Salerno, though, because he makes some really good catches in practice. He looks like a really good athlete. I know he just got moved to scholarship a couple months ago. He's been a walk-on guy for 4 years now, but at this point, you're going to have to start using him. I think in the blue gold game on April 23rd, you're going to see a lot of Matt Salerno because who else are you going to see? So, but those other guys that we did get to talk to, I spent most of my time with Deion Colsey, and look for a story on blueandgold.com about that this weekend. He's a confident guy. I think you could tell the whole freshman being a first-year guy, those jitters, that nervousness is behind him. It needs to be because Kevin Austin Jr. isn't here anymore. And if you're talking about outside wide receivers for Notre Dame, it's Deion Colsey, and maybe it was Joe Wilkins, but now it's not Joe Wilkins. So he needs to be a guy for Notre Dame that you can count on the outside, and he needs to be a guy that probably catches 5-6 balls a game. And, that's talk about the fall is way down the line. But right now in spring, when I mentioned the blue gold game, you're going to really want to see Deion Colsey do some really good things in that game, because if you don't, I feel like you're coming out of that game saying, okay, this wide receivers room is as much of a mess as everyone thought it was. But Colsey looks confident. I know you talked to Lorenzo Styles. He seems very comfortable in his second year. Jaden Thomas is another sophomore. I mean, three of the guys that we talked to today, we talked to four wide receivers. Three of them are true sophomores, and they all need to perform this year for Notre Dame to be any good through the air. So Braden Lindsey also looks confident. For him, it's just about staying healthy. I think he can be a 500-yard, maybe 6 touchdowns throughout the season guy, but he just needs to stay healthy. So confidence is there, but numbers really aren't with the Notre Dame wide receivers.
Yeah, and then kind of similarly along those lines, because of the numbers, a lot of them emphasized, and Coach Stuckey also emphasized, the fact that they're being taught to play every receiver position. It's not that Colsey's only in the boundary. It's not that Styles is only in the slot. They're being taught everything, which is, I guess you'd probably rather not have to do that out of necessity, but at the same time, they are kind of learning the whole field. They are getting that comprehensive look at how to play different positions in case that does come up in the fall, where you need to slide a typical boundary receiver into the slot, things like that. So then kind of moving on to what we heard from Marcus Freeman today, in addition to the injuries, he spoke a little bit about the defense. Again, we didn't get to see much of it, but what did he have to say? I know particularly with the interior defensive line, given a couple of injuries, and then also just kind of you need some new starters in there. What did he have to say about that?
Yeah, Marcus Freeman said he's not worried at all about the interior defensive line, and that's another thing. If the offense is okay, what are the wide receivers going to look like? The defense, I think everyone has been, what is the defensive line going to look like, especially on the inside without Kurt Heinisch, and Jason Adamalola has been out with injury. Marcus Freeman really likes Howard Cross. He really likes Jacob Lacey. He thinks those guys are going to be really good football players. And then he brought up the point that Adamalola is going to be there. I know he's not there in the spring, so you're looking at the middle of that defensive line. You're saying, okay, Howard Cross and Jacob Lacey can play, but can they play together as two guys who, quite frankly, I wrote about this, pretty much the exact same size, right, and a little undersized at that. But, to quell some of those worries, Jason Adamalola is going to be back. And then you still have a guy like Riley Mills, who Marcus Freeman mentioned, has been playing on the outside. He's been playing on the inside. If you're looking for size at the defensive tackle position, Riley Mills has all of that. Now, could he be better on the outside and maybe be a little more productive? Absolutely. But, that's another thing that Marcus Freeman said, is these guys are playing kind of all over the place, and that's why he's not so worried, is because they have guys. They just need to find out where they need to slot in and where they can slot in to be productive. So I think it could be a really good defensive line. If Marcus Freeman is saying that and he's a defensive mind, I believe him. I've been kind of thinking the same thing this entire time. Kurt Heinisch was a rather big guy, a rather maybe plump, if you will, guy, but he was still good. He was still a really good defensive tackle. So you don't need to have big, burly size. Save that for the NFL, where everyone is that size. Here at Notre Dame, I think those two guys that Marcus Freeman mentioned could be really good. And then there's just so many other guys that you could plug and play as well. Gabe Rubio, some of those other guys could easily play defensive tackle.
Yeah, and then he did, kind of as with everything, he did not rule out looking at the transfer portal. He said, you know what, if we have to go to the portal, look around, we're always trying to improve our roster, kind of the same mantra that he's been saying. He also said that about the wide receivers. So, yes, while he's very confident, he also did not rule that out. And then finally, kind of keeping with this same mantra, the quarterback situation. We do not have a starting quarterback, shocker, but he did give us a little bit of insight into kind of what they're seeing and what Tommy Rees is seeing. Tyler, could you speak to that?
Yeah, I think at this stage in the spring, Marcus Freeman isn't so worried that there's not a starting quarterback, because he wants to see what these guys look like. For example, Tyler Buckner repped with the ones last practice for most of the time, is what Marcus Freeman said. Drew Pine repped with them today, and in the periods that we get to see, 30 minutes worth of media viewing, those guys take turns. It's not really ones and twos, if you will, because it's individual drills. They're throwing to tight ends, wide receivers, and running backs all at the same time. They're just kind of rotating, but those two guys, I wrote about this in our observations piece, those two guys are getting the majority of those reps. It's basically 50-50, while Ron Pallas and Steve Angeli kind of stand off to the side and just observe those portions. So right now, it's a true quarterback battle. They're in the heat of it, and I think this is going to continue on into August, because Tyler Buckner's a sophomore. Drew Pine's a junior who's never started a game. They've almost attempted the same amount of passes. I think both of them are in the mid-30s for their entire careers. So you're dealing with guys who are inexperienced. Marcus Freeman wants to know what he has in those two guys. I think Tommy Reese wants to know what he has in those two guys. They have a really good general idea, but in terms of being a starting quarterback, there's so much that both of these coaches have to learn about those two players throughout the spring and then into the fall. So right now, yeah, you're right. Notre Dame doesn't have a starting quarterback, but one of those two guys is going to be the starting quarterback on September 3rd, I think it is, at Ohio State. There's just so much time to learn who that's going to be, and I think they're going to take their time in that process.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that, we are done here. We will be back, I think, next weekend. We get a look at the first 5 periods again. Again, we won't have access to kind of that full practice that we got last weekend where we get a lot of our information from. But we'll be back, and we'll be back with some of the coaches this week, too. So hopefully we'll have more to report. Before we sign off, remember, $1 for an entire year. Also, go online, get your magazine. These are things that you are going to need as you head into the football season. And also, that $1 deal will not be around forever, so you have to take advantage of it. We are signing off.